The sun was barely peeking over the jagged hills of the Arizona Territory when Clara Vaughn stumbled across the dry scrubland, her body aching with exhaustion, fear, and the weight of the unborn child she carried. Her dress was torn at the hem, her boots had lost their soles, and her bonnet, once crisp white linen, was now a dusty, frayed mess, barely holding her hair in place. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, hadn't slept properly in even longer, and yet she pressed on, because stopping wasn't an option. Not now, not when death was on her heels. She wasn't just tired, she was being hunted. Her late husband, Jesse Vaughn, had been an infamous outlaw, the kind men either feared or followed. He was bold, reckless, and dangerously charming, the leader of a gang that had robbed banks from Santa Fe to El Paso. 2 weeks earlier, Jesse had died in a shootout with U.S. Marshals just outside of Las Cruces. Word spread fast, and rumors followed even faster. One said he'd buried a cache of gold from his last heist before the law caught up to him. Another claimed he whispered the location to someone before dying, and many were sure that someone was Clara. But Clara didn't know where the gold was. Jesse had never trusted her with that kind of truth to him. She'd been a pretty thing to parade around, someone to love when it suited him, and control when it didn't. She'd only discovered she was pregnant days before he was gunned down, and by then, the nightmare had already begun. His enemies, his gang members, and worse, bounty hunters all wanted something from her. Some wanted revenge, some wanted answers, and all were willing to use threats or worse to get what they believed she knew. So Clara ran. She left Las Cruces in the dark of night with nothing but a threadbare satchel, a water canteen, and a revolver she barely knew how to use. She walked for days, cutting through brush, hiding in gullies, and skirting around ranches and towns for fear someone would recognize her name. With her belly swelling and her strength fading, it had only been sheer will and a deep instinct to protect the life growing inside her that kept her on her feet. But now, after almost a week of evading riders she couldn't outrun and thirst she couldn't quench, her knees buckled beneath her. Just as the horizon started to shimmer with heat, Clara saw it, a ranch. It looked like something from a dream. Nestled between cottonwoods and red cliffs, it stretched across the valley with fenced pastures, a large 2-story ranch house, smoke curling from the chimney, and cattle grazing under the watchful eye of ranch hands on horseback. It was the first place she'd seen that didn't scream danger. It looked like safety, like hope. Clara stumbled forward, heart pounding, legs trembling with the final effort. She reached the road leading up to the ranch gates, then collapsed, face down in the dirt. When she came to, a shadow blocked the morning sun, and a voice, deep, calm, and commanding, cut through the ringing in her ears. "You all right, miss?" She blinked up, her vision blurry, and saw the man crouched beside her. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a crisp linen shirt tucked into tailored ranch trousers, boots that gleamed, and a hat pulled low over eyes as gray as storm clouds. His face was strong, clean-shaven, with a quiet seriousness that felt more dangerous than Jesse's wild charm. "I need water," Clara rasped, her voice dry as paper. He didn't ask questions, just lifted her into his arms like she weighed nothing and carried her toward the house. She tried to protest, but her body was too far gone. All she could do was listen to the beat of his heart and the crunch of his boots on gravel. The ranch house was elegant, far grander than anything she'd ever seen. Polished wood floors, clean linens, oil lamps burning in wall sconces, and the scent of fresh bread and coffee drifting from the kitchen. He set her gently on a couch in a sunlit room. A woman appeared, older, sharp-eyed, kind hands. She pressed a cool cloth to Clara's forehead and murmured to the man, "She's burning up," the woman said. "Likely fever from exhaustion." "She's pregnant," he said. Clara blinked, struggling to speak. "My name's Clara Vaughn." The man's eyes narrowed slightly. "Vaughn?" She saw it instantly. He recognized the name. Everyone did. "My husband was Jesse," she whispered, voice cracking. "He's dead." He didn't flinch, didn't lean away. Instead, he studied her with a long, unreadable gaze, then nodded. "I don't care about him," he said flatly. "I care about whether bringing you inside brings a dozen armed men to my doorstep." "It might," Clara admitted. I didn't know about the gold. I don't know anything, but they don't believe me." He turned to the housekeeper. "Fix her something warm. She stays, at least until she's strong enough to walk." The housekeeper hesitated. "You sure?" "I'm sure." Clara lay in the bed that night, staring at the ceiling. The man hadn't told her his name, but the housekeeper had whispered it when she brought her soup. Weston Blackwood. He owned over 3,000 acres, 20 ranch hands, and enough horses to make a cavalry. He was one of the wealthiest men in the territory, and also one of the most feared. Rumor had it he'd killed a man in a duel in his younger days, but no one dared confirm it. They called him the Silent Wolf because he moved quiet and struck hard. Why had he helped her? She didn't know. Maybe it was pity, maybe it was curiosity, or maybe, just maybe, Weston Blackwood had once run from something to dot outside her window. Dust stirred on the far road. Riders were moving, watching, getting closer, and Clara Vaughn, once just an outlaw's wife, was now a hunted woman hiding under a stranger's roof with a child on the way, and the past not far behind. The next morning came with a hard knock at Clara's chest, an ache that reminded her she'd slept longer than she meant to. Her body had taken control. After days of fear and flight, her limbs had finally gone still, her eyes had closed, and she'd given into Weston Blackwood's clean bed and the safety of a locked door. But there's no such thing as safety for a woman carrying a dead outlaw's child. She sat up slowly, the morning light casting long shadows across the room. Her stomach tensed another kick, stronger this time. This baby was fighting just like she was, and they both knew time was slipping. A soft knock at the door. "Come in," Clara said weakly. The older woman from the night before entered, carrying a tray with eggs, bread, and hot tea. Her expression was no nonsense, but not unkind. "Name's Ada. Been with Mr. Blackwood 10 years now. He don't take in strangers, especially ones with trouble. So whatever you did to earn his attention, thank God for it. Now eat before it gets cold." Clara tried to smile, but her lips barely moved. "He doesn't even know me." Ada arched a brow. "He knows more than you think." Downstairs, Weston Blackwood stood at the kitchen hearth, staring into a simmering pot of coffee. His ranch foreman, Cal, had just ridden in from the southern fence line. "You were right," Cal said grimly. 3 riders camped out near Devil's Creek. Quiet, but armed. "Don't look like law. Vaughn's old gang?" Weston asked. "Or bounty hunters, either way. They ain't out there for the view." Weston's jaw tightened. He'd taken risks before many in his younger days. But this woman upstairs, this Clara Vaughn, was something else. She had danger sewn into the hem of her dress. But when he'd carried her up the porch yesterday, felt her shiver in his arms, heard the tremble in her voice, he knew she wasn't part of Jesse Vaughn's filth. She was trying to survive it. "I want em watched," Weston said finally. "But not engaged, not yet." Clara came down the stairs slowly later that day, wrapped in a borrowed shawl and her nerves. She found Weston alone on the porch, sharpening a hunting knife. He glanced up but didn't speak. She cleared her throat. "I just wanted to thank you for the room and the food." He nodded but didn't rise. "You didn't have to take me in." "No," Weston said. "I didn't." She shifted awkwardly. "I'll be gone soon. I don't want to bring trouble here." His eyes lifted to meet hers. "You're already here. Trouble too. No sense pretending otherwise." Clara's breath caught. "Then why let me stay?" Weston studied her a long moment. The wind tugged at his hat brim. "Because you're pregnant. Because your husband's mistakes shouldn't be your child's burden. And because," he hesitated, voice low, "I know what it's like to lose everything." They stood in silence as the wind rolled across the plains. That night, Clara sat in front of the fire, watching flames dance while Ada mended shirts. By lamplight, Weston was outside somewhere riding the fence, checking the horses, keeping his mind off whatever war was brewing near his gates. Clara ran her hand over her stomach, hard, heavy. The baby kicked again, more urgent now, like it, too, could sense the shadow tightening around them. Ada looked over at her. "You don't talk much about your husband." Clara didn't respond right away. "That's 'cause there's not much good to say." Ada nodded quietly. "I heard what Jesse Vaughn did. Heard it all. But that doesn't mean I believe you. We're part of it." "I wasn't," Clara said quickly, her voice cracking. "He kept me close. But in the dark. I never saw the gold. I never held a gun." Ada's hands paused in her sewing. "Then you need to tell Mr. Blackwood everything, every name, every place, every threat you know of. Because he's already bet something on you and he don't bet unless he's ready to fight." Weston didn't sleep that night. He stood on the porch, rifle in hand, watching shadows flicker along the distant canyon ridge. He didn't know what made him take Clara in. Maybe it was the pain in her eyes, or the way she didn't beg, didn't cry, just looked ready to collapse under the weight of everything she'd never asked for. Maybe he was tired of the silence that followed him through every room of this house. But one thing was clear. Trouble was circling his land, and sooner or later, it would strike. And when it did, the choice he'd made to shelter a hunted woman and her unborn child would either redeem him or get him killed. By the time the sun crested the eastern hills the next morning, Clara had made up her mind. She would leave the ranch before sundown. She had to. Weston Blackwood had shown her a kindness few men would. But she couldn't stay and let danger find him. She'd seen it before, the kind of ruin that followed her late husband like a dust storm. She'd lived in its shadow. She wouldn't let it touch someone decent, especially not someone like Weston. But as she tried to quietly repack her worn satchel upstairs, Weston appeared in the doorway, arms folded. "You planning to sneak out?" he asked, voice low but unreadable. Clara froze. "I was just running," he finished for her again. Clara looked down. "You don't understand. You're risking your life for a woman you don't even know. Jesse's men, his enemies, whoever they are, they're not going to stop until they've torn apart everything I've touched." "I'm not afraid of them," Weston said. "Well, you should be." Her voice cracked, surprising even her. "They kill anyone in their way. They think I know where Jesse's gold is, and they'll come for you. You've already done too much for me." Weston stepped forward, his eyes sharp but steady. "I didn't ask you to repay me, but I'm not going to watch you ride into the desert half dead and hunted just to protect me. You're not the only one with a past." Clara blinked. "What are you saying?" He took a long breath, then said it plainly. "I'm saying I can protect you and the baby, but not like this. Not as a stranger hiding upstairs." He pulled something from his coat pocket, a folded paper. Clara unfolded it. "A marriage license application." She stared at him, stunned. "You can't be serious." "I am," he said. "A married woman, especially to a man like me, becomes harder to touch. A wife can't be taken or questioned without the law stepping in. And this ranch, my name, carries weight. If someone's coming for you, let them come knowing they'll answer to Weston Blackwood." Clara's hands trembled as she held the paper. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said. "You're not a liar. You're not a killer. And you didn't ask for any of this. I also know you don't have time to run again." Clara felt the baby shift beneath her ribs. The weight of everything she'd been carrying collapsed into one terrible, terrifying thought. He was right. "But marriage?" she whispered. "It isn't just a name on paper." Weston nodded slowly. "It doesn't have to be more than a bargain. I offer you my protection and name. You accept shelter until the baby comes and the danger passes. What happens after that is up to us." Clara looked into his eyes, gray, steady, not cold but not desperate. He wasn't offering love. He was offering a line drawn in the sand between her and the wolves chasing her, and in the world she'd come from, that was worth more than any kiss. That afternoon, Weston rode into town with Clara seated beside him in the wagon. Ada had dressed her in a proper calico dress and bonnet, and though Clara's nerves coiled like snakes, she kept her chin lifted. They went straight to the justice of the peace. No fanfare, no vows, just names signed and a simple nod. When the old judge asked if she accepted Weston as her lawful husband, Clara hesitated for just a moment. Then she looked up at Weston and said, "Yes, I do." By sundown, word had spread through the town like wildfire. Weston Blackwood, the richest bachelor in 3 counties, had married a mysterious pregnant woman with no kin and no past. Some whispered she'd tricked him. Others figured she had something on him. But no one said anything to his face. Back at the ranch, Clara sat on the porch swing, staring out at the endless plains, hands folded over her belly. "I still don't know why you're doing this," she said softly. Weston leaned against the post beside her. "Maybe I was tired of sleeping in an empty house." Clara glanced at him, unsure if he was joking. "Or maybe I'm just too damn stubborn to let decent people get buried by other men's sins," he added. She nodded slowly. For the first time in weeks, she felt something strange. Not peace, not hope, but the faintest trace of belonging. Far off in the distance, a figure on horseback watched the house from the ridge. Eyes narrowed, rifle strapped to his back. The name Jesse Vaughn still meant something in the West, and someone out there didn't care who Clara had married. They just wanted what Jesse left behind, and they were coming to take it. The next morning dawned red and quiet. To quiet. Weston Blackwood stood outside the barn, saddle over his shoulder, watching the edge of the horizon as a low wind brushed over the dry fields. He didn't like silence. Silence usually meant something was coming. Inside the house, Clara stirred from her first real sleep as a married woman, though that word still sat strangely in her mind. The night had been quiet, yes, but full of tension, as if the house itself was holding its breath. She couldn't forget Weston's face when the judge had signed the papers. Calm, serious, unreadable. This wasn't love, not yet. But it was safety. It was the first roof that felt like it might not fall in on her. She sat up slowly, cradling her belly. The baby kicked, as if reminding her that time was moving forward ready, or not. An hour later, Cal, the foreman, rode in fast and tight, dust trailing his horse like smoke. Weston was waiting. They're getting closer, Cal said without dismounting. 3 of them camped at Burnt Tree Crossing. Same ones, watching the road, not moving yet, but they're armed and waiting. Weston's face stayed still. Did they see you? I don't think so. Good. Keep riding. Circle back through the canyon. I want eyes on them at all times. Cal nodded and spurred his horse away. Clara saw the exchange from the kitchen window. She didn't need to hear the words. She knew what it meant. They're closing in. When Weston came back inside, he found her in the parlor, hands clasped. Who are they? She asked. 3 men, he said. Possibly more. Same ones from before. Watching, waiting. I don't know if they want you, or gold, or a fight, but they haven't come down yet. Clara swallowed. It's Jesse's men, or the ones he double-crossed. They think I know where he hid the money. Do you? Her eyes snapped to his. No. He never told me anything. Not about the money. Not about the gang. Not even who he planned to betray. Weston nodded. Then they'll keep coming until they believe you, or until someone stops them. He said it like a fact. Like the weather. That afternoon, Clara walked the ranch with Ada, while Weston made rounds with the hands. The land was beautiful rolling hills, a silver creek, tall trees lining the far boundary. It felt nothing like the outlaw camps she'd known. There was peace here, order. Weston wasn't always like this, Ada said, noticing Clara's silence. Like what? Quiet, serious. He used to laugh, used to sing, even. She chuckled. He lost his wife 5 years ago. Pneumonia. Buried her under the cottonwood out near the creek. Never took to town girls. After that, never brought one home. Clara looked down. Then why me? Ada paused. Maybe because he sees a fight in you he once had in himself. As dusk settled, Weston found Clara sitting on the back porch, wrapping her shawl tight against the breeze. He brought her a mug of tea and sat beside her. They'll come soon, she said softly. Yes, and when they do, I'll be ready. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Clara asked, do you ever regret it? What? Taking me in? Weston shook his head slowly. No, but I don't make decisions halfway. If I take something on, I see it through. She looked at him, then really looked. There was no fear in his eyes, only something solid, something that made her feel steadier just being near it. Why are you like this? She whispered. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, because the world's already taken enough from me. I won't let it take you too. That night, the wind picked up. And somewhere out there in the desert a match was struck in the dark. 3 men saddled their horses and began riding toward Blackwood Ranch. The desert night was eerily still. Not even the coyotes howled. Clara sat upright in bed, heart thudding hard beneath her ribs. She didn't know what had woken her, a sound, a shadow, or the tightening in her belly that came when her instincts flared. She slid her legs over the side of the bed and stood, feet bare on the wooden floor. Somewhere outside, a horse whinnied. Low, nervous, she crossed the room and peeked out the window. 3 riders approached from the southern trail, torches low, rifles slung across their backs. They were here. Weston was already awake. He stood in the foyer, loading shells into his shotgun with slow precision. The creak of Clara's footstep made him glance up. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp, alert. They're here, she said, voice barely more than a breath. I know. Clara stepped forward. I can go out there, talk to them. Maybe if they see I don't know anything, they'll leave. Weston gave a dry laugh. Men like that don't talk. They don't negotiate. They take. She shivered. I've dealt with their kind before, he continued. They're riding with hunger in their bellies and blood on their minds. They're not here for the truth. They're here for gold, and you. Then I won't let them. Weston stepped closer. You're not doing anything except staying inside, behind locked doors. You're my wife now, Clara. That means you don't fight alone. Those words struck deeper than bullets outside. The 3 riders stopped at the edge of the ranch gate. The lead man dismounted. He was lean, snake-eyed, with a mouth twisted in a cruel smile. His hat was pulled low, his vest dark with sweat. He lit a cigarette, stared at the porch light glowing from the house, and spat into the dirt. Blackwood, he shouted, voice echoing across the night. We know she's in there. Clara flinched. You've got one chance. The man called. Send her out, and we'll leave peaceful. Lie to us, and this place burns before dawn. Weston stepped onto the porch, rifle across his chest. The lantern behind him cast his shadow long and lean across the boards. She doesn't know anything, Weston said evenly. She's got nothing of Jesse's. You want the gold, go find his grave. The man sneered. She knows more than you think. Jesse talked in his sleep. He kept maps, letters. You telling me he didn't leave nothin' with his pretty little wife? Weston's voice turned to steel. She's my wife now. A pause. Then the man laughed. That's so? He turned to the others. Hear that, boys. Blackwood's gone soft. Married an outlaw's whore and thinks that makes her clean. Clara's breath caught. Weston didn't flinch. You've got 10 seconds to ride off this land, he said coldly. Or you'll be the ones in the dirt. The snake-eyed man grinned wider. Then I guess we'll be seeing just how much fire you got, rancher. He signaled and gunfire erupted. The next 10 seconds were chaos. Weston dove behind the porch beam as the first bullet splintered wood near his head. He fired once clean and fast, and one of the riders tumbled off his horse with a scream. Inside, Clara ducked as glass shattered in the parlor window. She crawled across the floor, clutching her belly, teeth clenched against panic. Ada appeared, with a shotgun of her own. Get to the cellar, she barked. I'm not leaving him, Clara cried. Then stay low and stay quiet outside. Weston was fire and fury. The second rider circled wide, trying to flank the house. Weston moved like a ghost crossing the porch, reloading, firing again. Another shot rang out, and a scream echoed through the darkness. The third man, the snake-eyed leader, took cover behind the barn and shouted curses. You've made a big mistake, Blackwood. This ain't over. His voice trailed into the night as hoofbeats pounded the road, retreating. It was over, for now. 2 men lay dead in the dust. The third had escaped but not untouched. Weston stood at the gate, chest heaving. The silence returned, heavier this time. Behind him, Clara ran to the porch. You're bleeding, she cried, seeing the graze on his arm. I'm fine, he said, barely noticing. His eyes scanned the hills beyond the gate. Clara reached for him. Why did you do that? Why risk all this for me? He looked at her, then really looked. Because you're not just some outlaw's widow anymore, he said quietly. You're my wife, and no one takes what's mine. Far from the ranch, the surviving man rode hard under the stars, bleeding, furious. He'd seen something in Weston's eyes, a fire. He'd need more men, a better plan. Because Jesse Vaughn's gold was real, and Clara was the key to finding it. The next morning, a hush fell over Blackwood Ranch. The blood had been scrubbed from the porch, the broken glass swept from the parlor. One man had been buried on the edge of the pasture beneath a nameless marker. The other, who had survived but fled, left behind only questions, and a warning Clara couldn't shake from her spine. They would be back. Weston hadn't said much. He never did. But Clara saw the storm building in him. His every move, from tightening the patrols to doubling the ranch hands, was precise and calculated. His kindness hadn't vanished, but something colder had emerged beneath it. The man who'd once fought a range war and lived to tell about it. The man people whispered about in saloons when they thought he wasn't listening. Clara understood now why they called him the Silent Wolf. Later that day, Clara wandered out to the creek with Ada. They walked slow, Clara's hand over her belly, the soft gurgle of the water breaking the heavy silence. He'll kill for you, Ada said. Finally, Clara stopped. I know, you scared of that? Clara looked toward the distant hills. I don't think I am. Ada nodded. Good, because he's scared for you. That's rarer. They kept walking until they reached a large cottonwood near the water's edge. There, nestled in the shade, stood a small gravestone, weather-worn but lovingly kept. Clara read the name. Lillian Blackwood. She was his wife, Ada said gently. Died of pneumonia. Nearly killed Weston too, in his own way, after her. He locked his heart up like a gun chest. Never thought he'd open it again. Clara sank onto a flat stone, hand trembling. Then why me? Maybe because you've lost something too, Ada said. And maybe because he sees the fight still burning in you. That night, as Clara sat in the study with the lantern and Jesse's old journal, one of the few things she'd grabbed before fleeing Las Cruces, something odd caught her eye. A folded page at the back. She'd never opened it before. Jesse had hidden it well stitched into the inside of the back cover like a secret pocket. Her fingers trembled as she peeled it open. It wasn't a map. It was a letter. And it wasn't addressed to her, it was addressed to Red. Clara frowned. Jesse had never called her that. No one had. She read on. Red, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. The law or the boys caught up to me. Either way, you know where I stashed the Haldry Creek Gulch. Under the black rock where the river splits. Take what's yours, and if you find Clara, tell her I'm sorry I never told her the truth." Clara's blood went cold. He hid the gold, he did it alone. But someone named Red knows where it is. She stared at the words, heart pounding. Had anyone else seen this letter? Had Jesse told more than one person? Was this Red the same man who fled into the desert after last night's gunfight? She had a terrible feeling the answer was yes. Later that night, Clara found Weston outside, leaning against the hitching post, his head pulled low and his rifle close at hand. "I found something," she said quietly. He straightened. She handed him the letter. As he read, his eyes darkened. "Dry Creek Gulch," he muttered. "That's today's ride west, close to the old mining trails." "You think that's where they're headed?" Clara asked. He looked at her, sharp. "If this Red is who I think he is, he won't go alone. He'll bring more men who want blood, and when they find out you've got the map, they won't ask nicely." Clara's voice dropped. "Then we can't wait for them to come here again." "No," Weston said. "This time we go to them." The next morning, Weston saddled 2 horses, one for him, one for Clara's protection. She stood on the porch in a riding skirt and borrowed coat, the letter tucked safely inside her satchel. "You don't have to come," Weston said. "You can stay here. You're safe now. Let me handle this." Clara lifted her chin. "If I'm the one holding the key, then I'm part of this. I won't hide." He nodded once, pride flickering behind his storm-gray eyes. They rode out before sunrise, dust trailing behind them like smoke from a fuse. Ahead lay Dry Creek Gulch, and maybe, just maybe, the end of the nightmare. The desert stretched before them, wild, red, and unforgiving. For miles, there was nothing but wind, dust, and the steady sound of hoofs pounding against dry earth. Clara had never ridden so far, nor so deep into outlaw country, but she didn't flinch. Not now, not with Weston Blackwood beside her, his rifle slung across his back, his jaw set like stone. They traveled in silence for most of the day. Clara's muscles ached, her back burned, and the child in her womb kicked harder with every bump in the trail. But she said nothing. She couldn't afford to be weak. At dusk, they camped in a canyon of twisted stone. Weston built a fire, silent and methodical. Clara watched him from across the flames, his profile lit by orange glow. He looked like he belonged out here, part man, part legend. She finally spoke. "What if they're already there?" Weston didn't look up. "Then we deal with them." "You talk like it's easy." "It's not, but it's simple." That was Weston Blackwood, never wasting breath on fear. Just facts, action, resolve. Clara envied that part of him, but she was beginning to understand it, too. There was no room for panic on the frontier, only choices and consequences. By the next afternoon, they reached Dry Creek Gulch. It was just like the letter described, split by a dried-out riverbed, with one black stone rising near the fork like a crooked tooth. The place was remote, hemmed in by cliffs, and silent to silent. Weston held up a hand. "Dismount." They tied the horses among the brush and moved carefully. Clara stayed low behind him, heart pounding. They reached the black rock, and there behind a tangle of roots and packed earth was a shallow cache, cleverly hidden. Weston knelt and dug with his knife, pushing away dry soil until the blade struck something hard. He pulled it out, a wooden box inside, a canvas sack filled with gold coins, stamped and gleaming, wrapped in old cloth, and beneath them, a second envelope, this one marked simply to Clara. Clara's hands trembled as she opened it. "Clara, if you ever see this, I'm dead. I didn't tell you everything, because I was a coward and thought I was protecting you. But I know now I was just afraid. I never meant to drag you into my mess. The money's yours now. Do whatever you want with it, burn it, give it away, keep it, just live. I loved you, in my own broken way." Jesse. Clara stared at the words, torn between grief, anger, and something sad, regret. This was the apology she'd never heard from Jesse's lips, and yet it changed nothing. Behind her, Weston stood, watch tense, alert. Then, suddenly the sound of rocks shifting. Voices. Double quotes. "We got movement," Weston whispered. Clara turned. 3 men were climbing down into the gulch from the western ridge. One of them limped, snake-eyed, a gun at his hip. Red. Weston shoved the gold into his saddlebag and snapped it shut. "Go. Now." Clara didn't argue. She ran, clutching the envelope, her breath sharp in her lungs. Gunfire cracked behind her. She turned once and saw Weston crouched behind a boulder, firing with deadly calm. One of the men dropped, then another. But Red was clever. He circled, wide, rifle raised, and fired. Clara screamed as Weston stumbled backward, blood blooming across his shoulder. "No!" she cried. Without thinking, She grabbed Weston's rifle where he dropped it and fired. The shot missed, but it startled Red just enough to make him duck behind a rock. Weston, pleading, dragged himself upright, braced his rifle and fired again. This time, the bullet found Red's chest. The outlaw spun, then collapsed beside the black stone. Silence returned to the gulch. Clara ran to Weston's side, tears blurring her vision. "You're hurt, oh God." Weston, he gritted his teeth, clutching his arm. "Through and through. Hurts like hell. But I'll live. You saved me," she whispered. He looked up at her. "No, you saved me." They sat there together, surrounded by dust, blood, and gold, both shaking but alive. Later that night, under a desert moon, Clara looked at the sack of gold in the saddlebag. "All this," she said, "for money Jesse never got to spend. Men died for it. He died for it, and it nearly killed us too." Weston didn't answer. "Let's leave it," she said finally. "All of it. We don't need it." Weston gave her a long, quiet look, and then he nodded. They buried it deep beneath the gulch again under new stones, with no markings, and they rode away with empty hands, but full hearts. The trail back to Blackwood Ranch was slow and aching. Weston rode with one arm bound tightly against his chest, his shoulder raw from the bullet wound. Clara rode beside him, constantly glancing his way, every inch of her body sore but alive with something she hadn't felt in a long time: relief. They had made it out of Dry Creek Gulch alive. The gold was gone, buried again under desert rock and silence. The past, for once, had been laid to rest, but something else had shifted too, something between them. They camped under the stars that night, sharing a fire and a can of beans from Weston's saddlebag. The night air was crisp, scented with mesquite and the smoke of old wood. Clara laid a blanket near the flames and sat cross-legged, her belly rounding beneath the night sky. "Why didn't you try to keep it?" she asked softly. "The gold." Weston stared into the fire for a long moment before answering. "I've seen what money does to men. Jesse was proof enough. Even decent men get twisted over gold. I've got enough land, enough cattle. I don't need blood money." Clara nodded, watching the flames dance in the reflection of his gray eyes. "I think Jesse left that letter hoping I'd chase the money, hoping I'd carry on what he couldn't finish. I think he thought that was love. Maybe it was," Weston said, "his kind of love. But it wasn't right for you." She looked down at her hands. "No, it wasn't." Silence settled between them again, warm, deep, and gentle. "I never asked," Weston said suddenly. "What do you want?" Clara, she blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean once the baby comes. Once this is behind us. What kind of life do you want?" Clara didn't answer right away. No one had ever asked her that. Not Jesse. Not her parents. No one. "But now I want a quiet place, a real home, a safe place to raise my child. No running, no guns, just peace." Weston nodded. "You can have that, here, if you want it." Clara looked at him, uncertain. "You don't have to keep offering me things. You've done more than enough." He reached for her hand. "I'm not offering out of pity. I'm offering because I want a future too." Clara felt something flutter in her chest, not fear, not nerves. Hope. They returned to the ranch by noon the next day. Ada came running to the yard, scolding them both for disappearing and scowling at Weston's blood-soaked bandage. "I leave you two alone for 2 days and you come back with a hole in your shoulder and dust on your faces like stray dogs." But she was crying even as she fussed. Clara hugged her tightly. "It's over," she whispered. "I think it's finally over." That night, Clara stood on the porch, the stars shining bright above her, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Weston joined her, one arm still in a sling. They didn't speak for a while. Then Clara said, "I'm still scared." He looked at her. "Not of men with guns," she continued. "Not anymore. I'm scared of feeling too much, of wanting more, of what it means if I let myself stay." Weston didn't flinch. "You don't have to decide anything tonight." Clara turned toward him, her eyes soft. "I already did." He raised an eyebrow. "I'm staying," she said. "Not because I have to, not because you saved me, but because I feel safe here, with you, for the first time in my life." Weston's face didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, something deep and quiet. Then, gently, he reached for her hand again. She didn't pull away. In the dark hills beyond the ranch, there were no more riders watching from the ridge, no gunmen hiding in the brush, only wind, only stars, only the slow turning of a new chapter. Clara Vaughn was no longer an outlaw's widow. She was a mother-to-be, a rancher's wife, a woman who had survived everything the West could throw at her. And for the first time, she believed she could belong. 2 weeks passed, and with them, the wind changed. Blackwood Ranch returned to its quiet rhythm, horses fed, fences mended, cattle driven along dusty ridges while the sky blazed above. But inside the ranch house, Clara's world grew smaller and more intense. Her belly had dropped, her back ached. Every step felt like her body was reminding her something big, something irreversible was coming. Weston never left her side for long. He split his time between tending to the ranch and staying close, always returning with fresh water, blankets, or something to distract her, a carved wooden trinket, a tin of tea Ada found in town, a worn copy of the Prairie Songbook he'd once read aloud to Lillian on long nights. Clara had never been doted on. She didn't know what to do with it. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked one morning as he helped her into a chair by the window. Weston looked up, his brow drawn. "Because I care, and because you shouldn't have to do this alone. You're not responsible for me," she said, quieter. He paused, then knelt beside her. "No, Clara, I'm not. I chose to be." Those words, they undid something inside her. She reached for his hand, and this time, she didn't let go. But the sky had other plans. That night, a storm rolled in thick clouds black as gunmetal, thunder growling across the plains like wild horses. The rain began slowly, then came fast and hard, beating against the roof and filling the world with sound. And sometime after midnight, Clara screamed. Ada came running from her room. Weston was already at Clara's side, trying not to look terrified. She clutched the headboard, face pale, hair soaked with sweat. "It's time," Ada said, already rolling up her sleeves. "Get water, towels, and for God's sake, Weston, breathe." He did what he was told, running to the kitchen, fumbling with buckets, pacing as the woman he'd married gritted her teeth through wave after wave of pain. Clara cried out again, her voice echoing through the house. Weston stood just outside the room, fists clenched, helpless. But he never walked away. The storm raged, and so did Clara, her body fighting, enduring, pushing through hours that felt like days. She saw Jessie's face once in the haze of pain, then Weston's, then her child's, an imagined glimpse of a tiny hand reaching for her in the dark. And then, as dawn began to break, a baby cried. Ada laughed and wept at once. "It's a girl," she whispered, lifting the child, red and perfect and angry at the world. Clara sobbed, exhausted, broken open in every way. Weston stepped into the room, soaking wet from rain and nerves. Clara looked up at him, her face glowing with something fierce and fragile. "She's here," Clara whispered. "She's really here." He walked over slowly, kneeling beside the bed. "She's beautiful," he said hoarsely. Clara smiled through her tears. "She's everything I never knew I needed." They looked at the child together, this new life that didn't carry Jessie Vaughn's sin or Weston's sorrow, just possibility. Later that day, the storm passed, sunlight broke over the hills, and on the ranch porch, Weston sat with Clara wrapped in a shawl beside him, their daughter nestled against her chest. "She needs a name," he said softly. Clara nodded. "I've been thinking." He looked over. "Let's call her Hope," she whispered. Weston smiled. "That fits." For the first time in her life, Clara didn't feel like she was running. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't surviving. She was living with a man who had protected her. With a child who would never know the fear Clara once carried, with a home that was finally hers. Spring came early to Blackwood Ranch. The snow melted from the ridges, the fields turned green with wild grass, and the sound of cattle lowing filled the morning air again. But this year, everything felt new, warmer, safer, somehow more alive. Clara stood on the porch with baby Hope in her arms, the morning sun brushing gold across the land. She rocked gently, her daughter's breath warm against her chest, the sound of Weston hammering in the barn drifting softly in the background. There were no more men watching from the hills, no threats whispered on the wind. The storm had passed for good. Weston came out of the barn a little while later, wiping sweat from his brow. He smiled when he saw them, the two girls who had come into his life like thunder. "She sleepin'?" he asked. Clara nodded, "like she owns the place." He chuckled, stepping up onto the porch. "She kind of does." She handed Hope over carefully, and Weston cradled the infant with surprising tenderness for a man with hands made for rope and rifle. "You still planning to teach her to ride before she can walk?" Clara teased. "She's a Blackwood now," he said. "She was born for this land." Clara's smile softened. They sat down on the porch bench together, shoulder to shoulder, letting the world move around them. A few days later, Clara walked alone to the old cottonwood by the creek, the place where Weston's first wife, Lillian, had been laid to rest. The wind whispered through the leaves, the water trickled low, and Clara knelt before the simple stone, I know you don't know me, she whispered, fingers grazing the worn engraving. But I know you were important. I see it in the way Weston looks out across the land, the way he rides. I see you in the strength he carries. She paused, blinking back a tear. I won't replace you. I wouldn't try. But I'll take care of him. And I'll raise our daughter with grace and grit and all the love I've got. She left a small bouquet of wildflowers by the stone and stood, breathing in the scent of spring. When she turned to walk home, she felt lighter. Weeks passed. Hope began to smile. Weston began to laugh again. Ada stayed busy in the kitchen, muttering that the ranch had gotten too loud with joy. And Clara found herself becoming what she never thought she could be, a wife, a mother, a woman with roots. She rose early, fed the hens, kissed Weston before he rode out. She learned to bake bread, mend fences, and keep a rifle by the door, but not out of fear, just habit. Because in the West, you prepared for the worst but you prayed for peace, and at long last, Clara Von Blackwood had found hers. One night, Weston returned from town with a small wrapped box. Clara opened it carefully, frowning as she lifted out a delicate silver locket. Inside, on one side, a tiny photograph of baby Hope. On the other, a simple etched word, home. She blinked back tears and looked up at him. He didn't say anything. He just took her hand and kissed it. That was Weston, not loud, not showy. Just solid, and hers. In the end, the story wasn't about gold. It wasn't even about survival. It was about love born from hardship, forged through fire, a wounded woman, a hardened man, and a child who brought them both back to life. The West had tried to break them, but together, they built something that would never be broken.